basically, that's right, 6 and then 6, and then we're included in the second 6, so we're just doing it once. Or we're just doing it twice. A lot of people.
To make this day school happen, to bring it to
laughing, smiling, supporting our people.
When it came time for him to take the lead plaintiff role, I asked him if he would do that. He was a bit nervous, and he's
2009, and really what it is it's an action against the federal government for its role in the operation, its control role in the operation and management of federal Indian day schools. As you probably know.
So just 1 minute on what, but not 100%. A statement of defense, they get together and ask each other questions. They go and have a trial and there's a judge. But what happens if, as in this case, you have over 100 people all making the same claim? There can't be 100,000 separate lawsuits because they represented the class of survivors, individuals who went to schools. So that's how a class action works. In this particular action, I should say first, when we took this action over in 2016, we really had to start from the beginning to find what this action looks like. How many people are we dealing with? We retained a firm
across Canada to speak to survivors, to speak to leadership. And Gary had been doing this sometimes, should look like. And that was really important for us. So what we did, it was not overly legalized, and they wanted something where they wouldn't have to go and be cross-examined again. There were also concerns expressed about how their fees, how legal fees would be assessed as well. In this light, that we also learned that essentially we took the position that everyone.
This is different from both the court process and from the IRS process. And when a claimant, when a survivor fills out a claim form,
side and our side are aware of that and have that training. Ultimately, we've included a principle letting the likelihood of re-traumatization, and I think you'll see that in the process. But I already mentioned the concept of acting honestly.
This will look like actually on the ground. You heard Ray Mason mention that next week we will be asking the federal court to approve this settlement. It's not enough
agreement is at the end of this process. Essentially, the documents, all documents collected from individuals will either be destroyed. It is a very large class. I think that because of the size, to get a commitment by the government of Canada for a contribution of $200 million, these funds will be made available subject to court approval, and they will be put into the McLean Legacy Fund. This will be a non-for-profit corporation. It will bear McLean's name for the work that he did and to act as a legacy piece. We certainly know that when people go through traumatic events, have suffered harm in this nature, that for some people, not all, some people, as part of their healing, need to be able to tell their story, want to tell their story, and that is a good thing for some people. So the truth-telling forum is going to be a body, a place where people can share their story and meet with other survivors. I think that's a really important piece that we really want to emphasize that will be made available. It'll also have a function of educating the non-Indigenous community about what happened in schools. I think there's a lot of people out there that don't understand or appreciate what really happened in a lot of federal day schools. And so we'd like to use this as an opportunity to let other people know what happened. Current status.
So as we sit here today, where are we in this process? In June of last year, the federal court certified the McLean action as a class action. That just means that the court agreed with us that this was the proper subject matter of a class action, The court also certified Gary and others as representative plaintiffs and certified us, Gowling, WLG, and Jeremy and I as class counsel. A few months after that, after some furious negotiation, on December 6th, Gary stood with the minister outside the House of Commons and announced that we had reached an agreement in principle. So all of the key elements of the agreement were in place, and it was just left to work out the lesser details. Gary passed away in February of this year, just weeks before we were able to announce on March 12th that a settlement agreement had been signed. And so he didn't live to see that moment, which was underscored the importance of achieving this resolution, particularly to carry on his legacy. So on March 12th, there was an announcement that we had reached, on that day, signed a settlement agreement. That began the beginning of a notice period. So as we sit here today, we are still in that notice period. And what that notice period does is that it allows everyone to look at this settlement agreement, all of the details, all of the schedules, the list of schools, every element of the agreement is all public. It's all on our website and also available to everyone on indiandayschools.com and other locations to see whether people are in agreement and support this settlement. And we have heard a lot of indications of support. First Nations around the country have written to us. We've got a number of AFN resolutions, and we have a lot of support. There are also letters of objection. They're objecting to parts of it. And that is exactly how this process is supposed to go. We need to hear support and we need to hear objections. All of that material will be presented to the court next week. And the court will need to decide whether this settlement is in the best interests of all the class members. If the court approves the settlement, as I mentioned, it will appoint an administrator, it will appoint a third-party review officer, and then the process will need to accommodate an appeal period. That appeal period is 60 days. If there are no appeals, and that's not a certainty, but if there are no appeals, there's a 30-day implementation period. So we're looking at about a period of 3 months before the administrator starts to process claims. That's the kind of timeline, the estimate. It's a rough estimate because we don't know whether there will be appeals or other types of process, but that's a rough estimate of when this process will start being administered.
I just wanted to say that Bob mentioned the AFN. I wanted to really acknowledge Kevin Hart for a lot of his support that he provided from the very beginning. Anytime we ran into Gary, Kevin was always close by and always provided support to Gary and to the team. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Regional Chief Roger Augustine as well from the Atlantic, who is a named representative plaintiff, also gave us a lot of support. And Norman Yakilaya, Regional Chief from the North as well, gave that support and continue to provide that support, and we really wanted to acknowledge that. We wanted to acknowledge Chief Hudson as well for all of his support as well. He did write a letter in support, and we really appreciated that. I think what I can say is just from this perspective, we've had the opportunity to go through this process, and we did have a group of largely lawyer-based groups that came out fairly strong on social media to object to this process. And what I can say is that ultimately when we heard from the people and in terms of the letters of support, we had overwhelming support from the people who were really happy with this settlement agreement. And so we just wanted to acknowledge the people that have given us that support, and we'll continue to work with them. I think that's a fair point that I just really wanted to emphasize. I think that's really it. This presentation was sort of expedited. We did try to make it fast. I wanted to thank everyone for having us here. I'd really like to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to us, and we are honored to have this opportunity to appear before you and share this information. I think as we go forward in this process, we're happy to come back and update you as it goes forward, and we're even more happy to go to your communities and speak directly and provide this information to your community members, of course at no charge to anyone, and we'd love to have that opportunity as we move forward. Miigwech, as Gary would say, thank you very much. Oh, I don't know if we're doing questions or not. Sure.
Thank you, Ray, Nathan, and Council for the Day School Action, Robert and Jeremy, for bringing that update for us. So I just want to respectfully mention before we continue that we had 2 items for lunch that we had scheduled, but with that in mind, we will open up for a quick question period if there's any questions. We have Robert and Jeremy here to my right, and we'll take a few questions. Microphone 31.
Good afternoon. Raymond Flood din Kath. Bidin igam bingsan the. More commonly, St. Tisa Point First Nation. Oops, too close. Test. Is it better? Okay.
Maybe we can get a board list.
Testing. Good. Okay. You mentioned 5 levels of harm. Yes. Can we get the 5 levels?
Microphone 34.
No, I just wanted the 5 levels. Like the level 1, you mentioned.
Microphone 34.
I don't want the amount. I just want the level of harm. Well, like level 1 was like ear pulling. What's level 2? What would level 2 be like?
Microphone 31.
This is going to be a little easier, I think. The question was, what are the levels of harm? So there's on the harms document, there's a description at each level, and so it's mainly consists of either physical or sexual abuse, and the levels are described generally, so it's not a specific type of damage where people who suffered some sort of physical abuse would be excluded. So it's physical abuse, it's the severity that increases with each level. But there's a detailed description at each level that people will be able to look at and see where they fall into.
Well, where do they look?
So it's all part of the settlement agreement. It's all IndianDaySchools.com, the agreement and all the schedules are there, including the description of harms. Yeah, so we can disseminate an information package that describes the harms so that everybody will be able to see what that description is.
Okay, thank you so much.
What I wanted to say is just that our information, our contact information is up here. So what I can say is, I know that everyone's very important and busy right now and have a lot going on. So if you do need to ask any questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. Our website is IndianDaySchools.com, and it has the settlement agreement and all of the information there. So if you are looking for that information right away, that's where you can get it, but we will distribute a information package.
Okay, thank you very much, and I thank you for listening, chiefs, pluckies, people in attendance. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I also wanted to remind the floor that these were circulating and they have their contact info on them as well. And a PDF of this presentation will be distributed to you guys as we do not have them on the table right now. So I'll go to microphone 21.
Afternoon. Chief Janai, Sabatea Cree Nation. Just in regards to intervener status, are there any groups or First Nations or people applied on the process itself, on this case?
Can I just catch the first part of that sentence?
Intervener status, you know,
Yes.
has any groups, people, or organizations applied to try and stall this process?
There were several
And if they were successful or not, where they're at, give an update on that?
So there were several groups that applied for intervener status. We did respond to those in Calgary, and the court did dismiss those intervener applications.
Thank you, Chief Janai. Any further questions? Microphone 8, Chief Moody.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Pretty interesting discussion. I know there's been a lot of questions in our community. I'm from Sitsiwasi Cree Nation, and I know I've been trying to get a hold of your group, but it's nearly impossible, right? So obviously, our members, are wanting more information, and we don't have it ourselves. So, what would be the process? I mean, of inviting your group or your firm to come up to our community to do a presentation and answer some questions that our people have. Also, we have a huge population in Thompson. There's a lot of Aboriginal people in Thompson. It's comprised of 60% Aboriginal people, so there's a lot of people over there as well. And when you hire this point person in communities, are you guys going to be funding that position, or what's the process? Are you going to be hiring some people in Manitoba to deal with all these questions that people have in the province?
Okay, so what I can say is this, is in terms of us coming to your community, we are happy to do that, and you can reach out to Bob or I directly. I think these information things do have our contact information, so just reach out to us directly and we can set that up. We're happy to do that. I think what I can say is in terms of the call volume right now at our call center, what has happened is the lead up to May 3rd, we experienced a very significant spike of people who were inquiring about that date. There was a lot of people who thought that by May 3rd they had to get an application in, so there was information on, there was a lot of people who called on that. And so right now we have doubled our capacity of the phone center, the call center, so people will be able to get a response more timely. In terms of going to your community, of course, we'd be happy to do that. I think in terms of like even urban centers, it's nice to be here with all the chiefs, because if we could identify some of those major urban centers where a lot of community members are, perhaps we could coordinate something where we go to the urban centers and at the same time touch point each community, because that's really our goal. So we'd be happy to do that. In terms of the identification of a community member or somebody in the community, we initially, how this played out is we went to communities and there were individuals who just self-identified and said, you know what, I want to help, I'm on the community, I got a lot of people that are coming to me that want assistance, and I'm providing it to them. And there was no discussion of retaining them or anything. For a lot of community members just identified someone, so that's how this really started out. Was communities came to us and said, we have someone that helped people through the IRS process. This person is now helping people with day schools, and we thought that was a great opportunity to share information. They would contact us directly, and so that's how this has really played out. We haven't, the issue of compensating or retaining them hasn't really come up, so that's something that we'd have to really think about how to do that.
Thank you, Chief Moody. Microphone 22.
Good afternoon. I'm Chief McLean from the Lake Manitoba First Nation. My question is, in Lake Manitoba we had a day school, but also we had members that attended the residential school. Do they qualify for both, or is that a different?
They qualify for both. If a person attended another school, it doesn't disqualify them from applying in this process. As long as the person attended a federally operated day school, they are eligible to make a claim.
Thank you, Chief McLean. Microphone 26, Chief Batson.
Hello, Chief Batson, Pine Creek First Nation. So if this settlement goes through, or the hearings, after the hearings, how long do people have to apply? Because I heard it was a year, is that right? Or is there a time limit or not?
So the agreement calls for 1 year from the date of implementation. So that's not when the settlement is approved, but that's still a number of months out after the settlement is approved. So there's an initial period of 1 year to apply, but there's also a provision that will allow an extension if there's a reason why people can't apply, a further 6 months if they couldn't apply in the first year.
Okay, and so the people that have already applied online, what is that process for? Is just to get their name on the list early, or yeah?
So the difference is that the documents that people are filling out now, the registration forms, they're simply to be in our database so that we can communicate with people. We have 50,000 people that have already registered with us, but that's just a registration process. That's not a claim. That just allows us to communicate with people directly. But when the process starts, when the administrator starts the process, there will be an official claim form. That's the form on which a claim will be made. So that's the distinction between registration form and an official claim form.
I think I would really encourage people to, what we're seeing right now happen on the ground is there's a lot of miscommunication and a lot of retainer agreements that are being provided to people unknowingly with hefty contingency fees attached to them. So we're just encouraging people to review those really carefully before they sign documents. Gowling WLG is the only certified class counsel on this, so it's the only place you can get accurate information. So we just want community members to be aware of that. Going through this process, they should not have to pay legal fees, but this is starting to happen now, and so people need to be careful with that.
Thank you, Chief Batson. We'll go to Grand Chief Dumas on microphone 2.
Good afternoon. Check. B10. B10.
Microphone 2.
3.
3.
B10. Check. B10. B10. Okay, we're going to start with the early bird bingo, red cards. Just a quick suggestion. I feel that it's important, going on Chief Moody's request and some of the other questions of the chiefs, that I would recommend that we do some sort of agreement or arrangement with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs so that we could help facilitate some of the discussion, help coordinating, and then as well as some of the other initiatives that you'll be working on, so that we could ensure that our chiefs are being represented as well. So I think we'd like to do that.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent suggestion. We'll take you up on that.
Thank you, Grand Chief. Microphone 16.
Testing. Good afternoon, Chief Sastry from Musqueam First Nation. I have some concerns about this case now. Like the residential cases, my dad went through that, and a lot of the elders in my community feel that the legal part of it, they got most of their funds, and then they suffered through all this residential school. Is this what's going to happen with this case here? And they also asked me to ask for a list. I looked online for a list. I couldn't find a list. I wish I had a good list that I could show them of all the schools. And a lot of our people went to provincial schools too, like we'd use Frontier Collegiate, for instance. Before my time, there's a lot of people that had went there, and they weren't allowed to come home for maybe once a year. They would be allowed to come home, but that was provincial, so I don't know where that would fall under. But they questioned me on that, and I said, well, you know what, I could bring it up and ask. your firm there is working, working with this Gowling? You guys are the only ones? Because once it goes through the court and they approve it, there's going to be a lot of other people, a lot of other legal systems that are going to get into the system, and they're going to do the same thing they did to our people before they get the funds that's rightfully theirs. The question.
Thank you, Chief Setzer. Microphone.
Thank you, Chief. Three excellent points, and one of the, we should be very clear, one of the lessons we learned, not just from visiting communities, but from the IRS process, was exactly what you mentioned, that people who went through residential schools in the end were insulted and abused again by the lawyers. We went to one community, I think it was in Norway House, where an elderly lady came to us and said, I received my check from the lawyers from residential schools and I have it up on my wall. It's for the amount of $1. And so we took the position and we maintained, and it's part of the settlement agreement, there will be no legal fees by us charged to any claimants, no legal fees. And no deductions, other kinds of deductions, no tax deductions, no effect on social benefits. That's all been part of the settlement agreement, and the federal government has agreed to speak with the provinces to make sure that there is no deduction or reduction of benefits. So we took a firm position that people who went through these schools and suffered these harms should not then suffer further by having legal fees or any other kind of fees deducted from them. Second, the list of schools, it may not be the easiest to find, but it is on indiandayschools.com. There's an icon that you click on and the list of schools comes up. And again, that's an evolving list. So if people have information about schools that are not on the list, that should be on the list, we invite them to write to us and give us the facts. We will research those schools when we get that information.
I'll just add to that on the handout we have. It does have all our contact links, and the Indian Day Schools website is listed on there. And if you go on there, all of the documents are there. And if you go on the settlement agreement, you would be looking for Schedule K. That one lists all the schools. In terms of provincial schools, we mentioned that earlier. You know, obviously, if you look at the history of where First Nations people across Canada have been subjected to bad treatment, it's everywhere. And so when this first started out, it was really focused on the federal day schools. And so as we moved along, we heard a lot of stories about people who went to provincial schools who had really bad experiences. The only issue with that is that if we were to try to then bring them into the fold now, it would complicate things legally. It would take more time. So what the process you could do is you could commence another action separately for that. And I think that's what we've heard a lot about. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 29.
Good afternoon. Chief Clear Sky from Waiwasi-Kapu. Miigwech dinago chanish na be magabi na nakpinigewat. Chimiwech kidinin. Sorry I'm late. I was late, but I'm here. I got a quick question for you. Did the department or the federal government give you direction to come out to the communities and do the consulting with the First Nations?
Absolutely.
And if not, the federal government, to my knowledge, has put money aside for this compensation for the day schools, right?
Yes.
And are we going to go through another law firm like Merchants, Tony Merchants, took advantage of a lot of the residential school funding compensation to our First Nation members, and then complained like hell after, well, the money was gone. Is this kind of the same situation that we're going through? Because in my community, I designated one person in my community and has all the applications and submitting them on behalf of our membership. And you're here today to hopefully get some clients and then charge your percentage. Is that what I'm hearing here? Or?
No, so you did miss the front part of our presentation where we did go through all of that.
I don't need to hear it, but just a question to you, what I asked you.
Yeah, so we're not charging anyone legal fees, so that's not how this process has been designed. No one will be charging claimants fees for their compensation. We've set that up so that the compensation is protected for that very reason, the point that you've made. So that's one important thing I wanted to emphasize, is if someone goes through this process and they're awarded $100,000 in compensation, they will get $100,000 in compensation, no deduction for fees. That's one thing. On the consultation piece, that was something that we thought of as we started this, and this was influenced by the work of Gary and Ray Mason, who had already been out speaking to people. So what we did is we took that and we went with that. We went to communities and we talked to survivors, we talked to leadership, where we were invited. We never went into a community without being invited by leadership. So we did go to community members, we spoke to them, we heard from them, and they did give us guidance and instruction on how this process should look. And in terms of appointing a community member to help people in the community and sending those forms in, we thank you for that.
No, I just want to clarify that, because after seeing what happened with the residential school compensation package, a lot of our membership took whatever they got, and the lawyers took the rest, whatever it was, 45% of the whatever. Felt sorry for them, but anyway, I don't want that to happen again to our membership, and if there is any money going to our members, it should be going direct, not through UEs or AMC or whoever. It should be dealt, it should be dealt with them. And another thing I want to make note is we had an AFN assembly way back in the day, and the resolution was passed on the 60 scoop. And Robert Daniels was chief back then, and he made the motion and I seconded it. We had that AFN assembly in Edmonton. Just to give you a little bit of history, okay? I understand you're acknowledging people of the day, right? What about the ones in the past? I'm not feeling left out, but I think you should know. That's all I'm saying. So with that, I'll stop there before I get worked up anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Clear sky.
Thank you very much for that. And one point I'd want to say to that, I really appreciate your points and the information you're giving us. I'll just say that we really designed this process to be anything but the IAP process that was developed in the Indian Residential School process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I just want to be mindful of our other lunch session. So I'll take a couple more questions and then we'll move on in our agenda. We'll go to microphone 13. Microphone 13.
Good afternoon. Roland Whiteway, Barons River First Nation. I'm a proxy for Chief Hartley Everett. I have a question on the legacy fund. Is that already in process? And what one particular one I'm interested in is the healing initiatives. Is that in process already, or is there going to be applications for that? Because back, I was talking to Jennifer Wood one time, maybe 5 years ago, and I had explained to her with all these monies that were being awarded and stuff like that, we've heard it here already that the effects trickle down. It's a ripple effect to our generation today, that all this stuff affects everybody within the community. And I see this as a good thing if the healing initiatives. I think in remote communities and like isolated communities should take advantage of this, and the extra monies back then that was available or wasn't spent. I had indicated to Jennifer that time, maybe these type of funds should be used to building centers within the communities, healing centers and stuff like that, but it never, I guess it just fell on deaf ears, or it was just left at that. So I'm grateful that this is like what you're doing here. I believe this is a good thing. Thank you.
To answer your question, the McLean Day School Settlement Corporation has not yet been fully established. It will be, and that not-for-profit will administer that pool of $200 million. On the healing initiatives, we expect to be really community-based, exactly as you suggest. It'll be based on an application process to that company. So organizations, communities can apply for all four of the initiatives, but particularly for the healing initiatives, which we recognized and Gary recognized was of the utmost importance. So thank you.
Thank you. So we actually only have time for one more question. I had microphone 30 on the lineup, and then we do have their contact information behind me, as well as you had a handout that was circulating around the table with their contact information. So we will go to microphone 30, and I will refer to Ray Mason as he'll close this part of our agenda. Microphone 30.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek Harper from Red Chalk Lake First Nations. I'm a proxy for my chief from our community, and what I want to ask is the more of an invitation. We have 4 communities that are involved in our area, like Garden Hill, Keeshkeemaquah, St. Therese, and Red Chalk Lake, where I came from. If we invite you to one of our communities, which we will get our directors to do the inviting to that community, wherever is chosen for you guys to come. Because I know there's a lot of information that you have just given, and we need our people to know what's or what you guys are giving out. So if at any time early, like sometime in June, if we were to invite you guys, would you be able to make yourselves available at that date?
Chief, we will absolutely visit your community, no question about it, and of course at no cost. The timing is in question because we have a lot of requests, but we will schedule an early visit to your community. Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So at this time, regretfully, we have to close this question period. I know there's a few questions left on the floor, but I did get word from Grand Chief that AMC was going to potentially get their information. We're going to be in contact with them. So at this time, our presenters do have to run. So I will close it off with Ray Mason.
So, sorry, then I just saw Chief Tobacco put his hand up there, so we have time for one more question. Microphone 16.
Hello. Thank you very much, Grand Chief. Chief Tobacco here from Moosai Cree Nation. Yeah, I'd like to maybe provide some information or maybe receive some information. Is that when is this thing starting in 1940 or 1950 or 1929? Maybe there's some older people out there that are still alive and maybe take advantage of this initiative that we are talking about.
So, in terms of when it starts, it'll be different for each community. It depends on when the school opened in some cases. Schools on different communities opened at various times. But it ultimately starts as early as 1920, because that's when there are changes happening in the law compelling attendance at schools. So it's very important. We're with you. We completely understand that there are aging people that need to get compensated for this, and that's why we've tried to push this through as quickly as possible.
There was also another question that I been contemplating to ask is that, for example, years back in the 1940s and 50s, in particular the 1950s, I guess, is that a child went to school. He got apprehended to go to school, a day school, okay, at a very young age, maybe 4, 5, or 6. Then all of a sudden something happens in the family, in the community, that this guy was taken away, uprooted from his family and from his community to go to a residential school. So there is, you have to recognize and you ought to feel that there was something happening in that the scenario that I just described. So how is that going to be looked at, to determine the impacts of that child that was taken away? Of course, the underlying thing is he or she was uprooted. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. You talked about day schools and then people being apprehended and going to residential schools.
Well, I'm talking about specifically about a kid who was 5 years old.
Yes.
There is something that happened there. That kid was uprooted. Okay, there were psychological impacts that kid had suffered throughout his tenure in school, okay?
Yeah.
So that's my question.
Okay. And can I just ask, are you talking about they suffered at a day school or at a residential school?
I'm talking about what the kid had to endure, what were the impacts, okay? Of course, he's going to feel the effects of the day school and also the effects of the residential school. But I'm thinking about the impact a little boy or a little girl went through that time and so on through his adult life, okay?
Okay. I guess what I can say is I'm happy to speak to you personally on that, just to make sure I get your question. I'm happy to speak with you right after this, if that's okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, Chief Tobacco. I think we had microphone 29, and then we're going to close the question period. 29? Did you have a question?
Miigwech. My name is Keeshkeemaquah. This is Nikas. Miigwech, my name is James Cody from May-7-2019, and beside me is my Right Honorable Chief Murray Clearsky. I have a picture of him here. He claims he's one of the cutest one here of the children. They're all 5 to 11 years old. This is the East Side Day School, and this is the West Side Day School. And me, I'm a residential school survivor. And I'm glad I'm here with my fellow residential school survivor. He's sitting there with me for dinner. And thank you, Chief, for the wonderful dinner you gave us today. But when we talk about compensation, the day school compensation, my leader and I have discussed both schools in Keeshkeemaquah, and there's about 50 gone. already. So that's a saving to the government of 50 students. And some of these that are in this picture are gone also. We didn't count the ones in these two pictures. We just counted the ones that we know have left us. So that's, I'm just thought, what happens to the savings of those 40 to 50 students from Keeshkeemaquah? The funding. Where is it set? Is it set aside somewhere? Because I know those students will be registered, but they're gone. It's just like the residential school program. I've seen it, I've lived it, and there's the honest truth, the honest to God truth as I learned in school. I've seen a terrible, horrendous punishment done to students, young girls, young boys. But the thing is, we mourn. We at Keeshkeemaquah, my leader here, we talk about our students are long gone that have lived through the life of a residential school student, punishment, and they were never compensated because they were gone. Most of our people, and I'm glad, it's an honor to be sitting here with my leader today. He's my adopted young brother, and he's got an older brother that's he was quite an athlete. His name was Harry Clearsky. Maybe some of you have heard of him. And he was inducted into the Manitoba Boxing Hall of Fame. And he was in the Canadian Army for Airborne Division for 3 years. Now, damn residential school syndrome today. We lost many of my fellow students because of the residential school. And some of these students I didn't go to these, but some of these students have told me how Mrs. Zink was, how strict Mrs. King was, hitting them with that yard. I don't know if anybody here knows about that the teachers used. I got hit by that in school many times. But these students talk about getting hit by that. They deserve to be compensated, some of the students that are left. I just thought I'd bring these up. These are old. These pictures are older than some of the people here. And that's proof that there was a day school, there are 2 day schools in Keeshkeemaquah, and both of them failed. The residential school failed, with day school failed. Now we went into Rossburn and Russell, that failed. Now we have our own school. That's progress, because we got rid of the famous residential school and day school thoughts that are dug deep in our hearts. I thank you for listening to me, and I want you to see these pictures. I want you to see them. My little brother's in there. He committed suicide because of alcoholism. But there's a picture of him here. And I thank you for listening. I'm sorry I took up so much of your time. I apologize. But I had to come up here and be brave enough, and I am brave enough to, because I have my leader here beside me, and he'll protect me. He's always protected me. And that's what my leader does, our leader. And he protects us, he helps us. Rich.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that, and you don't have to apologize for anything. That's what we're here for, is to listen. We thank you very much.
Thank you, Elder. Once again, I want to thank everybody for coming and listening to us. I want to thank our legal team, especially the chiefs and the audience. We hope that everybody has learned something this afternoon by our presentation, and we hope that our information will help everybody. Like, it's for all the people back home that we need to serve and help. I was talking to the Grand Chief here, Arlen Dumas here a few minutes ago, and we said that in the immediate future we will set up a communication link. He'll designate a staff member to work with me, and we'll endeavor to continue that communication link to the people that need that information. So we'll work that out ASAP. And before I close, I want to say, I guess a lot of people are wondering, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Well, I'm the old grunt. I'm the old guy that initiated everything back in 1986. I started with the Indian Residential School. I was instrumental in helping bring that about. And because of day school survivors was not included in the day school, I initiated the initial class action. Granted, it wasn't the proper or the right class action or statement of claim that we made, but we started it. And I brought in Gary McLean, and Gary and I, we worked very, very closely as a team. There wasn't a day that went by without Gary phoning me and asking me for advice on what way or what direction should we go, and what should we ask our lawyers, our legal team, for the best possible deal for our people, And I want to say something that when I last spoke to Gary, it was in a hospital. It was 3 days before he passed away. And I knew he wasn't going to come out alive, and I told him, thank you. I asked him, partner, buddy, I said, what are we going to do if all hell breaks loose and the roof caves in and you leave us? And he sat up and he looked at me, and with a great big grin, his usual smile, and he says, Ray, you put me here. You taught me everything. You know what has to be done. Just get her done. Just get her done. That's what he said. That was his last words to me. Thank you. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fulfill his demand to me to help get this done. I want to thank Robert and Jeremy for making this happen, to help me fulfill my buddy's dream. And we will get her done. And we must look at it this way, folks. We have something in front of us that will certainly help us in the future, in the immediate future. Something that we do not have, that we didn't have yesterday, but we could have for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you again to Ray, Mason, and Robert and Jeremy for all the information they shared with us today on the Indian Day School class action. So before we move on to our next agenda item, we will be hearing from Chief Batson. I would ask if our Grand Chief of Manitoba, Keeshkeemaquah, Okanagan, can come bring opening remarks.
Miigwech, Ujo, Numagumaga dituk, ato sininenta po may bijan, kinin. Eminenta me wab minaguk, sa unagunji, ukimaga anak, pagkusentam taban wijen duang. I am very honored once again to be in Treaty 1 territory on the Long Plain First Nation, and I'm very happy to see all of you. Always an honor to be speaking at this assembly when we're discussing very important issues that pertain not only to the South and the North, but collectively we address issues that reflect and pertain to all of our First Nations. And I just want to say that I'm sorry that I missed the opening part of this morning. Some very important discussions were being addressed here, and also the class action suit that has been pursued by warriors such as our fallen brother Gary McLean and Ray Mason. I have nothing but high regard for the work that was done, because it really affects our people all over Manitoba, and it's something that has been pursued, and the work that has been done is something that I commend, and hopefully that we can get some resolution to that issue, because it has affected our people. And for the last 100 years, we've been dealing with the repercussions of the damages done by assimilation and colonization. And we have addressed a lot of things pertaining to the residential school through Truth and Reconciliation and 60 Scoop. Considerations have been deliberated and discussed, and then we still have this piece that haunts us with the day school survivors. But I'm thankful that we are able to discuss that in this assembly, so that our people can come to a place of healing, that people can find closure for what they have been through the day school experience. Because in those day schools, they're also deprived of their culture. They're also deprived of speaking their language. And in this day and age, I think that we've come to a place where we're starting to deal with all of those issues and begin to emerge as a nation that has survived so many atrocities, but we're still here. And we're still not only surviving, but we've become warriors, because there's a difference between being a survivor and a victim and being a warrior. But I think that we've come to that stage that we rise up as warriors and no longer tolerate regimes and agendas that are being imposed upon us. And I think that we have the leadership and the capability to be able to move forward in a state of mind that has conquered all the challenges that have been thrown at us as Indigenous people. So I'm very happy to be here, and I look forward to this afternoon's deliberations. I'm just so happy that I can come from the north, and seeing all the chiefs from up north is always very good to see, because It is those people that I serve and I work for, and I've been trying to spend a lot of time up north connecting our organization with the people of North, but I'm thankful that I can come to this assembly so that we can join our forces, collectively work on issues together, that we can rise up as people in Manitoba so that our people are no longer victimized by regimes, by the governments. So thank you. I always want to acknowledge my brother, Grand Chief Dumas, for always being welcoming at these assemblies, and Regional Chief Kevin Hart, and all the chiefs that are here, and all the elders. I just want to bring greetings from MKO. It's always a pleasure to be here. Kinanaskumit na ako gagano, kasuin mo gusto na ako gagano, egusani.
Okay, with that, Grand Chief, as directed, we're going to take a short break. After that presentation, I'm sure there's a lot of emotion in the air. I know I get emotional whenever I hear about presentations like that. So we'll take a short 6.5 minute break. Your time starts now. Make it snappy.
6.5 minutes.
Short break.
Rehearsing now. Yes. We're getting legit. Yes. Right. And maybe do an album. Yeah. Yeah. All of it. That's a good idea. We can do like a all the studios. So just so you know the background of pop, right when you're next time you shoot like this. So now like Randy Travis. Yeah. So when they did the talent, they did this talent show, right? And the radio station was up, and they said the top 10 people were going to give them the Sunshine Studios and record it, right? So, but what they didn't tell people is if you did an original, you were going to win. So all those people on that CD singing original songs, all of them. So then he was so excited. He was so excited. It was his dream. That's he was so excited. My uncle said all the studio musicians like they were mad. But that's why he's so passionate. And gives away his Breeze.